Ethan's eyes glistened. He turned away slightly, hiding the emotion threatening to spill over. Scene, the final speech a year later. At the Carrington Foundation's first anniversary gala, Ethan stood on stage beside Amara before a packed crowd of reporters. "Hueys and young students," he began, voice steady but heartfelt. "A year ago, I was a man with everything except a reason to live. Then one ordinary person reminded me of something extraordinary. That kindness is the most valuable currency on earth." He turned to Amara. "She gave me a hug when I didn't deserve one. She taught me that no matter how broken we are, love still finds a way to reach us." The audience rose in applause, some in tears. Amara smiled, eyes shining under the lights. When it was her turn to speak, she said, "When I met Mr. Carrington, I saw a man who'd forgotten what hope looked like. But I also saw someone still capable of love. All I did was remind him." Ethan reached out his hand, and she took it. The moment felt timeless and not romantic, but sacred. A connection built not from attraction, but from healing, a epilogue. The hug that saved 2 lives later that night. As they stood on the terrace overlooking the city, Amara said softly, "Do you ever think about that night?" He smiled faintly. "Every day. It was the night a stranger saved my life." Amara laughed through tears. "You make it sound dramatic." He shook his head gently. "It was. You gave me something no one else could. A second chance to feel human again." The rain began to fall, just like it had that first night. Amara turned toward him. "Arms open. Come on," she said softly, smiling through the drizzle. "For old time's sake?" Ethan laughed quietly, then stepped forward, and for the second time in his life, accepted a hug that felt like redemption. The city lights shimmered behind them. 2 souls, once broken by grief, now whole through kindness. Because sometimes, the smallest act, one simple hug, can rewrite 2 lives forever. The gala had ended hours ago. The city outside was quiet now, blanketed in mist and soft rain. Ethan Carrington stood alone in his penthouse office, staring at the skyline that once symbolized his isolation. But tonight, the lights didn't feel cold anymore. They felt alive, as if each glowing window held a story of its own. On his desk sat a single envelope handwritten in careful cursive. "For Mr. Carrington, from Amara." He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. "Dear Mr. Carrington, you once told me that money builds empires, but kindness builds people. I never forgot that. When I met you, I saw a man who had everything the world could offer, except peace. You taught me that even the richest hearts can be poor if they forget how to love. My mother used to say, God places people in our paths not by accident, but by purpose. I think I was meant to meet you, not to change you, but to remind you that your story wasn't over yet. Thank you for believing in me, for standing by me when my world was falling apart. You were more than a mentor. You became my family." Amara Ethan sat there, the paper trembling in his hands. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and whispered, "No, Amara. You changed me more than you'll ever know." Scene, the 1 year later. The following spring, the Carrington Foundation opened a new youth center in Harlem. It wasn't a glass tower or a sleek corporate office. It was warm, colorful, filled with laughter and life. A large mural on the wall showed 2 silhouettes under an umbrella. One tall, one small, surrounded by the words, "Kindness can save a life." Ethan walked through the halls as children ran past him, holding books and toys. He stopped at a classroom where Amara was teaching a group of teens about goal setting and confidence. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Hey, you're early," she teased. He grinned. "You forget, I'm your boss." "Correction," she said, crossing her arms with a playful smile. "You're my partner in kindness." They both laughed. Later that afternoon, Amara invited him to the rooftop garden of the center, her favorite spot. It overlooked the city, the skyline stretching endlessly. But here it felt peaceful. She handed him a cup of coffee and said, "You know, sometimes I think the night I hugged you was the start of both our second lives." Ethan looked at her, the girl who'd once been a stranger, now the beating heart of his foundation. "His purpose, his family, it was," he said softly. "Because that night I learned that love doesn't always come as romance. Sometimes it comes as rescue. A warm breeze swept through, carrying the scent of rain and new beginnings. Scene, the circle completes. As evening fell, a woman approached Ethan with a small boy clinging to her hand. "Mr. Carrington," she said shyly. "This is Jaden. He's one of the new kids in our program. He lost his parents last year." Ethan knelt down, smiling kindly at the boy. "Hey there, Jaden. Welcome home." The boy hesitated, then asked softly, "Are you rich?" Ethan chuckled. "I used to be, but now, I'm just happy." The boy frowned in confusion. "How can you be both?" Ethan smiled gently. "Because happiness is the real kind of rich." Amara watched from behind, her eyes misty with pride. That single moment, watching the billionaire kneel before a child, was the picture of transformation. A man who once ruled the city, now serving it with love. Scene, the hug that started it all. Flashback. As Ethan drove home that night, raindrops began to fall again, soft, rhythmic, cleansing. At a red light, he glanced through the window of a small coffee shop and froze. A young man sat inside, shoulders slumped, head buried in his hand, clearly broken. Without thinking, Ethan parked, walked in, and approached him. "Hey," he said gently. "You look like you could use a friend." The man looked up, eyes red. I just lost my job. I don't know what to do." Ethan smiled faintly. That same smile Amara once gave him. "Then you start again," he said softly. "And you remember, yet you're not alone." Before leaving, Ethan placed a card on the table. Carrington Foundation, helping hearts heal. And as he walked away, he thought he heard the young man whisper, "Wait. Sir, can I hug you?" Ethan turned back, surprised. But then he smiled. "Of course you can," and just like that, the circle was complete. The kindness Amara gave him, he now gave to another. Epilogue. Love always finds its way. The next morning, the sun rose over Manhattan, gilding the skyline in gold. Ethan stood by the same window where his story began. But this time, he wasn't alone. Amara walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Morning," she said cheerfully. "Morning," he replied, smiling. They stood there in silence for a moment, watching the city breathe. Then Amara said softly, "You know, you never did thank me properly for that hug." Ethan chuckled. "You're right." He turned to her, eyes filled with warmth. "Thank you, Amara, for saving me when I didn't even know I needed saving." She grinned. "You're welcome, Mr. Carrington." As they clinked their mugs, sunlight spilled across the room, bright, endless, alive, and in that golden light, 2 souls, one who gave love, and one who learned to receive it, stood side by side, proof that sometimes a single hug can change everything. The city never slept, but inside the towering glass walls of Carrington Holdings, silence reigned. Past midnight, most lights in the building were off, except on the top floor. Ethan Carrington, one of the world's youngest billionaires, sat behind his massive oak desk, eyes fixed on the city skyline. His reflection stared back at him, tired, lonely, and lost behind the illusion of power. The world envied him. They saw the cars, the penthouse, the empire, but no one saw him. The man who hadn't smiled since his wife and son died in a car accident 3 years ago. Every night, he stayed late at work, as if hiding from sleep would keep the nightmares away. Downstairs, the cleaning crew began their rounds. Among them was a young woman named Amara Lewis, a 22-year-old part-time worker and college student who cleaned offices to pay for her tuition. She had heard the stories. Everyone had Ethan Carrington, the genius billionaire with a heart of ice. But that night, fate decided to put them in the same room. It was 12:47. Amara was quietly wiping the glass walls of the executive floor when she noticed the light spilling out from Ethan's office. Most nights, she avoided going in while he worked, but something about tonight felt different. When she peeked through the half-open door, she saw him sitting there, hands trembling, a half-empty glass of whiskey by his side, and a photo frame turned face down on the desk. He didn't notice her at first. His eyes were lost somewhere far away. She hesitated, then gently knocked. "Sir, excuse me. I didn't mean to bother you." Ethan looked up sharply, startled. "Who are you?" "Amara, sir." I clean the top floors, he nodded curtly. Fine, just don't mind me. She nodded and began wiping the glass walls silently. But as she worked, she couldn't help glancing at him. The man looked broken. His eyes were red, his jaw tight. As if he was fighting tears he refused to let fall. And then she heard it, a quiet whisper that wasn't meant for anyone. I don't know how to keep going anymore. Amara froze. She turned slightly. Sir? He didn't respond, just stared at the city lights like a man watching the world move on without him. Something inside her stirred. She had seen loneliness before, in her mother's eyes after her father walked out. But this was deeper. She took a small step forward. Sir, are you okay? He gave a hollow laugh. Do I look okay? His tone was sharp but not cruel, just exhausted. Amara hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay quiet, but her heart wouldn't let her. Maybe not. But sometimes, the people who look the strongest are the ones hurting the most. Ethan looked up, really looked at her this time. Her voice wasn't pitying, just gentle, and for a moment he forgot how to speak. He leaned back in his chair. You're very direct, miss? Amara. Well, Amara, I'm not sure what kind of comfort you expect to give a man who's lost everything. She took a breath. Sometimes comfort doesn't need words. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? She hesitated, then whispered, I think you need a hug. Can I hug you? Ethan froze. No one had said something like that to him in years. He wanted to refuse, to brush it off, to hide behind pride. But the look in her eyes disarmed him. Before he could answer, she stepped closer, slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. He didn't, when her arms wrapped gently around his shoulders. The dam inside him broke. He didn't remember the last time someone had touched him with kindness. Not pity, not business. Just warmth. His body trembled. His breathing hitched, and then he cried. Tears fell, heavy and unstoppable, soaking her uniform. She said nothing, just held him tighter, whispering softly, It's okay. You're not alone. Minutes passed. The storm outside roared, but inside that office, a different kind of storm ended. When he finally pulled away, his voice was hoarse. Why did you do that? Because, she said simply, I know what loneliness feels like. And sometimes a hug saves a life. He looked at her stunned. No one had spoken to him like that, not in years. Thank you, Amara, he whispered. Over the next few weeks, Ethan began noticing her more often. She'd leave little notes on his desk after late nights, quotes about hope, faith, and healing. Never signed, but he knew they were from her. He started smiling again, talking again. He even began funding a new scholarship program for students who worked part-time jobs like Amara. One evening, he asked her to meet him in the office. When she arrived, the usually cold space was glowing with soft light and a single framed photo on his desk. A picture of his wife and son. Amara, he said gently, you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? She asked. Humanity. She smiled, eyes glistening. You already had it, sir. You just forgot where you left it. He chuckled softly. Maybe you reminded me. He handed her a letter. It's a full scholarship. You don't need to clean offices anymore. Her hands shook. Sir, I can't. Yes, you can, he said warmly. You earned this, Amara, and besides, he smiled faintly. You already gave me something worth more than all the money I have. She blinked back tears. What's that? A hug that healed me. They both laughed softly. Months later, at the launch of the new scholarship foundation, Ethan gave a short speech to a hall full of students and journalists. When I met Amara Lewis, he said, glancing toward her in the audience, I was a man surrounded by people, but completely alone. She reminded me that no amount of wealth replaces kindness. She didn't change my company. She changed me. The crowd applauded, and Amara smiled through her tears. Later that night, as they stood under the city lights again, Ethan whispered, You know, Amara, I never expected that hug, she smiled. Life's greatest miracles usually come when we least expect them. He looked at her, grateful. Thank you. For reminding me how to live again, she smiled softly. Anytime, sir? And as the night breeze brushed past, Ethan realized something profound, that the richest man isn't the one with the biggest bank account, but the one who learns to love again. Months passed since that night, the night that changed everything. Ethan Carrington was no longer the man people whispered about in corporate halls. The once cold, distant billionaire now greeted his employees with warmth, started charity initiatives, and even began having lunch with his staff, something unthinkable before. But there was one person who remained closest to his heart. Amara. One morning, Amara arrived at the office for her first day as Ethan's official scholarship assistant. When she entered, she noticed something on his desk, a small silver frame with a photo of them standing together at the scholarship event. She smiled softly. "You kept that?" Ethan looked up from his papers. "Of course I did. It reminds me that even the strongest walls can fall, if someone knocks gently enough." She blushed. "You sound like a poet now, Mr. Carrington," he chuckled. "Maybe I'm just learning to feel again." Scene. The storm returns. That evening, a heavy rainstorm hit Manhattan, eerily similar to the night they first met. Thunder echoed across the skyline as lightning lit up the dark clouds above. Ethan was preparing to leave when his phone buzzed. A message from Amara. "Sir, my mom's in the hospital. They don't think she has much time left." Without a second thought, Ethan grabbed his coat and rushed out. When he reached the small public hospital, he found Amara sitting outside her mother's room. Hands trembling, tears spilling silently. "Amara," he whispered, kneeling beside her. She looked up, her voice breaking. "She's all I have left, sir. I can't lose her." Ethan didn't speak. He just sat beside her, offering quiet presence. Then she leaned into him, trembling, and whispered, "Sir, I think I need a hug this time." Without hesitation, Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her as she cried. The same way she once held him. No words were spoken, just two broken souls finding strength in each other's kindness. Her mother passed away that night, peacefully, holding Amara's hand. Ethan stayed by her side through the entire thing, through the tears, the silence, the numbness that follows grief. When it was over, she turned to him and said softly, "I don't know what I'd have done if you weren't here." He looked at her, eyes filled with emotion. "I wasn't there for the people I loved once. I won't make that mistake again." Scene. Healing begins weeks later. Amara began volunteering at the foundation Ethan had started. Together, they helped children from orphanages, struggling single mothers, and students who couldn't afford education. The foundation became a symbol of second chances, not just for the world, but for both of them. One day, while visiting a children's home in Harlem, a little boy tugged at Amara's sleeve and said, "Miss Amara, is that man your dad?" Ethan laughed softly, but Amara froze, glancing at him. For a moment, she didn't know how to answer. Then she smiled gently and said, "He's someone who taught me what love really means."